My name is Sue. I'm 26, and I work as a graphic designer at a small marketing firm in Chicago. After college, I moved back in with my parents to save money. They seemed supportive at first, but lately something changed. For weeks, they've been making snide remarks about my career choice. Then last night, it finally happened. Mom shouted. "Starting next month, you'll pay rent if you want to stay here," Dad added. "Maybe it'll teach you some respect." I never thought my own parents would break my heart this way. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to hear what happened after I made the hardest decision of my life. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, in a house with a white picket fence and seasonal decorations that my mom changed religiously with each holiday. My childhood was comfortable and stable. My father Thomas built a successful career as an accountant at one of the city's prestigious firms. He worked long hours, but always made it to my school events, sitting stiffly in his business suit among the other parents. My mother Linda had been an elementary school teacher before deciding to become a full-time homemaker when I was born. She was the neighborhood's go-to for PTA meetings and bake sales. Our family had always been close-knit, with Sunday dinners being mandatory and summer vacations planned months in advance. Growing up, I was taught traditional values, hard work, financial security, and practical career choices were the cornerstones of a successful life. My parents never missed an opportunity to point out how my father's accounting degree had provided our comfortable lifestyle. But from an early age, I gravitated toward art. I would spend hours in my room drawing, creating characters and worlds that existed only in my imagination. By high school, I had filled dozens of sketchbooks and started experimenting with digital art on the computer my parents bought for school projects. My mother would sometimes watch me draw with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're so talented, Sue," she would say, "but maybe you should focus more on subjects that could lead to a stable career." When college application time came around, the tension began. My parents had their hearts set on me pursuing business administration or pre-med. I still remember the disappointed look on my father's face when I announced I was applying to art schools for graphic design. "Art is a hobby, not a career," he said firmly over dinner. "We're not spending thousands of dollars so you can learn to doodle." After weeks of arguments and tears, we reached a compromise. I would attend a state university with a respected design program, but also minor in marketing to have something to fall back on. It wasn't my dream school, but it was a path forward with my passion somewhat intact. College flew by in a blur of design, projects late nights in the studio, and growing confidence in my creative abilities. My portfolio developed, and I even won a regional student design competition my junior year. My parents attended the award ceremony, and for a brief moment, I thought they finally understood my path. Then came graduation, right in the middle of an economic downturn 2 years ago. The job market for new graduates was brutal. After dozens of rejections and near misses, I finally landed an entry-level position at a small marketing firm. The pay was minimal, barely enough to cover student loan payments, let alone Chicago rent prices. My parents suggested what seemed like a practical solution at the time: move back home temporarily to save money. They presented it as a smart financial decision, and initially they seemed genuinely supportive. "Take a year to build your resume and save for a decent apartment," Dad advised. "No sense throwing money away on rent when you're just starting out." I moved back into my childhood bedroom now, stripped of most of my teenage posters, but still unmistakably mine. I established a routine of commuting to the city for work, contributing to household chores, and occasionally buying groceries. I even cooked dinner once a week, usually on Thursdays when Mom had her book club. For the first few months, things were harmonious. I continued applying for better positions at more established agencies while gaining experience at my current job. My parents seemed proud when I would show them projects I was working on, even if they didn't fully understand design terminology or the importance of certain accomplishments in my field. As long as you're happy and working toward independence, Mom would say, though I sometimes caught a questioning look in her eyes. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, their comments began to change. When I mentioned industry standards for junior designers' salaries, my father would scoff and compare them to what accountants made right out of college. When I stayed up late working on freelance projects to build my portfolio, my mother would make remarks about real jobs requiring early mornings. I tried to ignore these subtle digs, chalking them up to generational differences and their concern for my future. But deep down, a growing discomfort took root, as I realized that their support had an expiration date, and it was approaching faster than I had anticipated. My alarm goes off at 6:30 every morning. By 7:15, I'm on the train to downtown Chicago, portfolio bag slung over my shoulder, often putting finishing touches on projects during my commute. The marketing firm where I work, Creative Spark, occupies half of the fourth floor in an older building with unreliable elevators and excellent natural light. My days are filled with client briefs, design revisions, and team meetings where we brainstorm campaigns for local businesses and the occasional regional brand. I start work at 8:30 and rarely leave before 7 in the evening. The pay is modest, barely enough to cover my student loans, cell phone bill, and the small amount I insist on contributing to my parents for groceries. But the work itself fills me with purpose. There's something magical about transforming a client's vague ideas into visual reality, about choosing just the right color palette and typography to convey a brand's personality. Even on the most frustrating days of endless revisions and contradictory feedback, I never doubt that this is what I meant to do. 3 months ago, after staying late every night for 2 weeks to help land a new client, my creative director called me into her office. Mia is in her 40s, with streaks of silver in her dark hair and an impressive collection of statement jewelry. She's been my mentor since I started at the firm. "Sue, your work on the Lakeside Brewery campaign was exceptional," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "We're promoting you to junior designer with a raise of $2 per hour." The promotion was more significant for the title change than the modest pay increase, but it represented recognition of my hard work and growing skills. I practically floated home that evening, eager to share the news with my parents. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, without looking up from chopping vegetables for dinner. "Does this mean you'll be able to afford your own place soon?" My father was even less enthusiastic. $2 an hour. After all that overtime, you should ask for more, or, better yet, consider using your marketing minor for something more lucrative. Their reaction stung, but I tried to explain the significance in my industry. This is actually a big deal for someone only 2 years out of college. The title change will open doors for better positions down the road. My father grunted. "Seems like a lot of doors need to open before you reach a real career path." That evening marked a turning point. What had been occasional comments about my career choice transformed into nearly daily remarks. My mother began every other phone conversation with my cousin Jessica's latest accomplishment in her financial analyst position. "She just got another bonus," or "she's already been approved for a mortgage on her condo," became regular conversation starters. My father took a more direct approach. One Sunday, as I worked on a freelance project at the dining room table, he peered over my shoulder. "Still playing with those computer drawings?" he asked. "When do you think you'll get serious about a career with advancement opportunities?" "Dad, this is my career," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The industry is competitive, but I'm making progress. Drawing logos is a hobby, Sue. Your mother and I are worried about your future. These exchanges became increasingly common. If I mentioned a challenging project at work, my mother would sigh and say something like, "Well, at least you're having fun." Some people have to work at jobs they don't enjoy. During family dinners, my career became a regular topic of contention. I tried educating them about the design industry, showing them successful campaigns by major brands, and explaining how vital visual communication is in today's digital marketplace. I pulled up salary data for senior designers and creative directors to show the growth potential. Those are probably outliers my father dismissed. For every success story, there are dozens of people who never make it past entry level. One particularly painful evening, my mother invited her sister, my Aunt Paula, and her family for dinner. The conversation inevitably turned to careers, with my uncle proudly discussing my cousin's recent promotion. Jessica's firm values her analytical skills, Aunt Paula beamed. They're even sending her to a conference in New York next month. My mother nodded enthusiastically before turning to me with a pointed look. Maybe Jessica could talk to someone at her company about openings. I'm sure they need people in marketing. Mom, I'm a designer, not a marketing analyst, I said quietly, feeling everyone's eyes on me. But you have that marketing minor, she pressed. It wouldn't hurt to explore options with more stability. The undercurrent of these conversations was always the same. My chosen career wasn't valuable, practical, or respectable enough. My passion was dismissed as childish, and my progress was invisible to the people whose approval I'd always sought. My closest friend from college, Taylor, became my lifeline during this time. A photographer struggling with her own career challenges, she understood my frustration during our weekly phone calls. They're from a different generation, she reminded me after I vented about another uncomfortable family dinner. They equate success with very specific types of jobs. I know, I sighed, but it hurts when they call my career a hobby right to my face. Have you thought about moving out? Taylor asked gently. This environment seems toxic for your mental health. I had considered it, but Chicago's rental prices were intimidating on my salary. I'm trying to save enough for a decent security deposit and first month's rent, I explained. Maybe in a few more months. Little did I know that the decision would be forced much sooner than I had planned and in the most painful way possible. Last Tuesday started as a promising day. Our team had just completed a major rebranding project for a local chain of organic grocery stores, and the client meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. Mia had asked me to present my portion of the design work personally, a significant vote of confidence in my abilities. The presentation went better than I could have hoped. The client loved our direction, especially the logo variations I had created for different applications. They approved the project with minimal revisions, and afterward, Mia pulled me aside. Excellent work today, Sue. If you keep this up, we might be looking at another promotion by year's end. I practically floated through the rest of the day, staying late to finalize some details while riding the high of professional validation. It was nearly 9 o'clock when I finally headed home, mentally rehearsing how I'd share this success with my parents. Maybe this would finally help them see that my career had legitimate value and potential. When I arrived home, I noticed my parents' bedroom light was still on, unusual for them, as they typically went to bed early. As I approached their partially open door to say goodnight, I heard my name and paused. I'm worried about Sue, my mother was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the gap. She's 26 and seems to have no ambition beyond these little art projects. I know, Linda, my father replied. We can't support her indefinitely while she figures out life. My colleagues' kids her age are already established in their careers. With a jolt, I realized my mother was on the phone with someone with the speaker activated so my father could participate. The voice that responded was unmistakably my Aunt Paula's. "Have you considered having a serious talk with her?" Jessica says. "Her company is always looking for bright people in their marketing department." We've tried hinting, my mother sighed, but she's stubborn about this design thing. It's been 2 years and she's still making entry-level money. At this rate, she'll never move out. She's become dead weight, honestly. My mother continued, each word hitting me like a physical blow. Coming home at all hours always, with some excuse about working late on projects that hardly seem to pay anything. "The problem is, we've made it too comfortable," my father added, his agreement piercing my heart. "She has free housing, home-cooked meals, no real expenses to worry about. There's no incentive for her to grow up." I must have made a sound because suddenly they went quiet. I pushed the door open, no longer caring about eavesdropping. My mother sat on the edge of their bed, phone in hand, while my father stood by the window. Their expressions shifted from surprise to guilt when they saw me. "How long have you been standing there?" my father demanded, recovering quickly. "Long enough to hear that I'm dead weight," I replied. My voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. "Long enough to hear how disappointed you are in my career and life choices." My mother quickly ended the call with Aunt Paula. "Sue, we didn't mean." "Yes, you did," I cut her off. "You've been making your feelings clear for months now. I just didn't want to believe my own parents had so little respect for me." "It's not about respect," my father said sternly. "It's about practical reality. You can't expect to live here indefinitely while pursuing a job with limited prospects." Something inside me snapped. After months of snide comments and undermining, after years of trying to prove myself while seeking their approval, I couldn't take any more. "Limited prospects. You have no idea what my industry is like or what I've accomplished because you've never bothered to really listen or understand." "We understand that you're nearly 30 and still living at home," my mother said, her tone hardening. "We understand that your cousin Jessica, who's 2 years younger than you, already owns her own condo." "Not everyone measures success by Jessica's standards," I shouted, surprising even myself with the volume. "Some of us value creative fulfillment over corner offices." My father's face reddened. "Creative fulfillment doesn't pay bills. Maybe it's time you learned that lesson." "Starting next month, you'll pay rent if you want to stay here." My mother suddenly shouted, standing up. $800 monthly, plus your share of utilities. That's still less than an apartment would cost you." I stood frozen. The amount, nearly half my monthly take-home pay. "Maybe it'll teach you some respect," my father added coldly, "and make you reconsider your priorities." The word respect ignited something fierce inside me. Respect. You want to talk about respect when you call my career a hobby to my face, when you call me dead weight behind my back? "We've supported you for 2 years after college," my mother countered. "Most parents wouldn't be so generous." "Generous," I laughed bitterly. "You've undermined my confidence, dismissed my achievements, and compared me to Jessica at every opportunity. That's not generosity, that's slow poison." For the next 20 minutes, years of unspoken tension erupted. They brought up every decision they had disapproved of, from my choice of major to a summer internship at a design studio that paid nothing but gave me valuable experience. I defended each choice, explaining the strategic reasons behind them, but they weren't really listening. "Your generation thinks passion pays the bills," my father said dismissively. "In the real world, practical skills and hard work are what matter." "I work harder than you know," I said, my voice breaking. "You just don't value what I do." My mother softened slightly at this. "We just want what's best for you, Sue. No, I replied, sudden clarity washing over me. You want what you think is best for me. You've never actually asked what I want or need. I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls to come back and discuss this rationally. In my bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down, until I sat on the floor, tears finally breaking free. This room, with its pale blue walls and carefully preserved childhood mementos, suddenly felt like a museum to a person I no longer was. The realization hit me with startling force. I couldn't stay here any longer. Not just because of the rent ultimatum, but because every day in this house reinforced the message that who I was and what I valued wasn't enough. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I made the decision that would change everything. For my own mental health and self-respect, I needed to leave. Not next month, not next week, but now. After hours of restless tossing and turning, I heard my parents' bedroom door close around 11:30. I waited another hour listening to the house settle into nighttime silence before quietly getting out of bed. With determination fueling my movements, I pulled my large suitcase from the closet and began the process of deciding which parts of my life would fit inside it. The practical items were easy clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and design tablet, important documents. The harder choices came with sentimental objects. The framed photo of our family vacation to Florida when I was 15 before college decisions and career paths complicated everything. Should it stay or go? The handmade quilt my grandmother had given me for high school graduation. The collection of art books that had inspired my journey. As I carefully folded my clothes and wrapped fragile items, memories flooded back. My 10th birthday, when Dad taught me to ride a bike without training wheels in our driveway. Mom making my favorite chocolate chip pancakes before every first day of school. Family game nights where we laughed until our sides hurt. Where did we go wrong? I whispered to myself carefully. Packing the snow globe my parents had brought me from their anniversary trip to New York. Despite everything, I couldn't hate them. They were products of their generation and their own parents' values. They genuinely believed they were guiding me toward happiness as they understood it. But I couldn't sacrifice my identity and passion to meet their definition of success. Not anymore. The practical challenges of my decision weighed heavily. I had some savings, about $2,000 I'd been putting aside for an eventual move, but that wouldn't last long in Chicago. My current salary would make finding affordable housing difficult, especially with good credit, but no rental history. I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend Amanda, who lived about 30 minutes away in a small 2-bedroom apartment with her boyfriend Kyle. "Are you awake?" I typed, glancing at the clock, showing 1:15 a.m. 3 dots appeared immediately. Amanda was a night owl who worked as a bartender at an upscale restaurant. Just got home from shift. What's up? I took a deep breath and typed, had huge fight with parents. Need to move out immediately. Any chance I could crash on your couch for a few days until I figure something out? The response came quickly. Oh my God, yes. Our couch is your couch. What happened? Tell you when I see you. Can I come tomorrow after work? Come whenever. Kyle and I both have keys under the ceramic frog planter if we're not home. Relief washed over me. At least I had somewhere to go immediately, a safe landing spot while I figured out next steps. I continued packing, being selective about what I took. There would be no room for excess in Amanda's already crowded apartment. Once the suitcase and 2 duffel bags were filled, I surveyed my room. It still looked lived in, with books on shelves and posters on walls. Only someone who knew me well would notice the absence of essential items. The hardest part came next. I sat at my desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. What could I possibly say to explain my disappearance? After several false starts, I kept it simple and dignified. Mom and Dad. After last night's conversation, I've realized it's time for me to be fully independent. I've found another place to stay and will be moved out by the time you read this. I'll be in touch when I'm settled. Sue. No accusations, no emotion, just facts. I placed the note on my perfectly made bed where it would be easily visible. The internal conflict nearly overwhelmed me as I prepared to leave my childhood home. Part of me loved my parents deeply and understood they thought they were acting in my best interest. Another part felt betrayed and devalued in ways that cut to my core. The words "dead weight" echoed painfully in my mind. By 4:30 in the morning, everything was ready. I'd called a rideshare to arrive at 5, giving me time to quietly move my bags to the front porch. The house remained silent as I made 3 careful trips downstairs with my belongings. My parents were typically heavy sleepers, particularly my father, who sometimes used a white noise machine. As the eastern sky began showing the first hints of dawn, I stood on the porch of the house where I'd grown up, keys in hand. I should leave them, I knew, but something stopped me. Maybe I needed the option to return in an emergency. Maybe I wasn't quite ready for such a definitive break. I slipped the keys back into my pocket just as headlights appeared on our street. The driver loaded my bags while I took one last look at the 2-story colonial with its carefully maintained flower beds and the maple tree I'd climbed as a child. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. This wasn't an impulsive decision of anger, but a necessary step toward self-respect and independence. "Where to?" the driver asked as I settled into the back seat. "Downtown Chicago, please," I replied, deciding to head straight to work early rather than disturb Amanda at this hour. I could store my bags in the office supply closet until evening. As we pulled away from the curb, the mixture of liberation and terror was overwhelming. For 26 years, that house had been my safety net, my constant. Now I was cutting the cord, diving into true independence with limited resources and no backup plan. By the time we reached the city, rush hour was beginning. I directed the driver to my office building, paid with a sizable chunk of my available cash, and dragged my bags inside. The security guard Jerome looked surprised to see me so early and with luggage. "Moving in, Miss Sue," he joked. "Just some project materials," I lied, not ready to explain my situation to anyone yet. At my desk, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to my parents. They would be waking up soon, finding my note, discovering my partially emptied room. Would they be worried, angry, relieved? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I resisted the urge to check my phone. Around 10 o'clock, the inevitable happened. My phone lit up with Mom on the caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, Dad appeared. Same response. Then text messages started arriving. "Sue, where are you? Call us immediately. This is completely irresponsible. We need to talk. Are you safe? Please just let us know you're okay." The last one nearly broke my resolve. I typed a quick response. "I'm safe. At work. Need space." By lunchtime, my phone showed 15 missed calls and over 20 text messages. I turned it to silent and focused on getting through the workday. Mia noticed my distraction, but didn't pry when I mentioned I was dealing with family stuff. At 6:30, I finally headed to Amanda's apartment, exhausted from both lack of sleep and emotional strain. When she opened the door, one look at my face told her everything. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a tight hug as I finally let the tears flow freely. "You're home now. It's going to be okay." And standing in her tiny entryway, surrounded by my bags and uncertainty, I desperately wanted to believe her. Amanda's couch became my bed for the next week. It was a sleeper sofa that sagged in the middle and squeaked with every movement, but it represented something precious: freedom to make my own choices without judgment or conditions. Kyle and Amanda were gracious hosts, giving me space in their refrigerator and bathroom cabinet, never making me feel like an imposition despite the cramped quarters. "Stay as long as you need," Amanda insisted when I mentioned looking for apartments. "Seriously, we're happy to have you." But I knew their one-bathroom apartment wasn't designed for 3 adults. Besides, this was meant to be a temporary landing pad, not a new dependency. Each evening after work, I scoured rental listings on my laptop, setting up appointments to view studios and one-bedrooms within my limited budget. The reality of Chicago's rental market quickly became apparent. Anything affordable was either in unsafe neighborhoods or had significant issues like mold or broken appliances. Anything decent was far beyond what I could afford on my junior designer salary. On day 3 of my apartment hunt, I expanded my search to include roommate situations. By day 5, I'd interviewed with 4 potential roommates and found a promising option: a small bedroom in a 3-bedroom apartment shared by 2 other creative professionals: Jenna, a freelance photographer, and Zach, an audio engineer. The apartment was in Bucktown, a vibrant neighborhood with reasonable access to public transportation. "We need someone by the 1st, Jenna explained during my visit. Our previous roommate moved in with her boyfriend without much notice. The room was tiny, barely fitting a full-size bed and dresser, but the rent was manageable, $700 monthly, including utilities. More importantly, my potential roommates understood creative careers and irregular hours. The space works for me," I told them, "and I'm ready to move in immediately if you'll have me." 2 days later, I signed the lease agreement and paid the security deposit and first month's rent, nearly depleting my savings. The financial reality was terrifying, but the alternative, returning to my parents' house with its emotional toll, was unthinkable. Meanwhile, my parents continued their campaign of communication. The tone of their messages evolved from anger to concern to guilt-inducing pleas. "We're worried sick about you," read one text from my mother. "Please come home so we can work this out." "Your mother is barely sleeping," my father wrote. "Is this really necessary?" I maintained minimal contact, sending brief texts confirming my safety, but nothing more. I wasn't ready for a conversation that would inevitably involve them, trying to convince me to return or criticizing my decision as impulsive and immature. My coworkers became unexpected allies during this transition. When I hesitantly explained my situation to Mia, she immediately organized an office collection of household essentials. "We've all been there," she said, helping me load a box of donated dishes, towels, and bedding into a rideshare after work. "Starting over is tough, but you're tougher." Jorge from the design team had a spare desk lamp. Tara from accounts offered an air mattress until I could afford a proper bed. Even the office manager, Diane, contributed a slightly used coffee maker she'd replaced at home. My new room gradually transformed from empty space to personal sanctuary. I hung my design prints. Using removable adhesive strips, arranged my modest book collection on a small shelf. Zach helped me mount and positioned my desk near the window for natural light. The space was minimal but functional, with everything carefully chosen and arranged. The financial challenges were considerable. After rent, loan payments, and basic necessities, my budget had virtually no margin for error. I created a detailed spreadsheet tracking every expense, cut my own hair instead of visiting a salon, learned to cook simple meals in bulk, and became an expert at finding free entertainment options throughout the city. Through it all, I maintained radio silence with my parents beyond terse confirmation texts that I was alive and well. My phone registered their calls daily at first, then every few days, as weeks passed. Each time, I let them go to voicemail, not yet ready to engage. 3 weeks after my departure, an unexpected opportunity arose at work. A major client needed a complete rebrand on an accelerated timeline, and Mia selected me to lead the design team. It means longer hours and more responsibility, she warned, but also a temporary pay bump and serious portfolio enhancement. I threw myself into the project, grateful for both the additional income and the professional distraction. 14-hour workdays left little time to dwell on family drama or financial stress. The creative challenge energized me in ways I hadn't experienced before, validating my career choice, despite my parents' dismissal of it. During this intense work period, I began connecting with other creative professionals in the city. A weekly design meetup at a local coffee shop introduced me to mentors and peers who understood the industry's challenges and opportunities. An affordable figure drawing class at a community arts center helped me maintain fundamental skills while providing social interaction. Slowly, I was building a community that appreciated my talents and ambitions without trying to reshape them into something more conventional or practical. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen and valued for who I actually was, not who someone else wanted me to be. 6 weeks after leaving home, I received a text from my mother that stopped me cold. "Came into your room to clean today. Why is it empty? Where are your things? Please call us immediately. We're panicking." It took me several minutes to process what this meant. They hadn't entered my room in the 6 weeks since I'd left. They hadn't noticed I'd taken most of my possessions. Had they assumed I was staying elsewhere temporarily but would return? Had they even read my note? I showed the text to Amanda during our weekly dinner meetup. "That's bizarre," she said, frowning. "How could they not notice for 6 weeks?" "I think they were giving me space," I replied slowly, but still expecting me to come back once I calmed down. They didn't realize this was a permanent move. "Are you going to call them?" Amanda asked gently. I stared at the message again. "Not yet. I'm still figuring out who I am without their expectations weighing me down. I'm not ready to risk losing that clarity." Instead, I sent another brief text. I moved out. "I'm safe. Will contact you when I'm ready to talk." Their response was immediate and frantic, asking for my address, demanding a phone call, questioning my mental state. I turned off notifications for their numbers, needing to maintain my hard-won equilibrium. The client project consumed my days and many evenings, but as it neared completion, I recognized the growth it represented. I was managing other designers, presenting concepts directly to C-level executives, and seeing my creative vision implemented across multiple platforms. This wasn't a hobby. It was a career with tangible impact and progressive advancement. 2 months after leaving home, I received my first official paycheck, reflecting my project leadership role. The amount represented a 30% increase over my previous salary, still modest by many standards, but enough to ease my financial strain and begin rebuilding my savings. I celebrated by buying a proper bed frame to replace the air mattress I'd been using. That evening, as I assembled the simple platform bed with Jenna's help, I realized something profound. I was building more than just furniture. I was constructing a life aligned with my values and vision, piece by piece, day by day. The foundation might be modest, but it was mine, created with integrity and intention rather than compromise and resentment. Still, in quiet moments, I found myself wondering about my parents. Had they learned anything from my departure? Did they understand the pain their words had caused? Or were they simply angry at what they perceived as filial betrayal, despite everything I hoped for their growth as much as my own? I wasn't ready to find out yet. But for the first time since leaving, I began to consider what reconciliation might look like, not as a return to old patterns, but as the establishment of a new, healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than dependence and control. The Wednesday afternoon was unusually warm for October when our office receptionist called my desk. "Sue, there are people here to see you. They say they're your parents." My heart stuttered. After nearly 8 weeks of minimal contact, they had tracked me down at work. I briefly considered asking the receptionist to send them away, but realized this confrontation was inevitable. Better to face it on neutral ground than have them potentially discover my new apartment. "I'll be right out," I replied, taking a deep breath and smoothing my dress. They stood awkwardly in our small reception area, my father, in his typical business casual attire, my mother, clutching her purse with white knuckles. They looked simultaneously familiar and strange like characters from a book I'd read long ago. "Sue." My mother stepped forward as if to embrace me, then hesitated when she saw my stiff posture. "We've been so worried." "We need to talk," my father added his tone, carrying that familiar note of authority that once would have made me acquiesce immediately. I was acutely aware of our receptionist and several co-workers within earshot. "This isn't the place," I said quietly. "I'm in the middle of my workday." "We've been trying to reach you for weeks," my mother's voice rose slightly. "You've ignored our calls, our texts. We didn't even know if you were safe." A few heads turned in our direction. Mia appeared from the creative department, sensing the tension. "Everything okay, Sue?" she asked, her eyes darting between me and my parents. My parents stopped by unexpectedly. I explained, maintaining my composure. "I need a few minutes to speak with them." Mia nodded. "Take what you need. We can push the client call to 4. I turned back to my parents. "There's a coffee shop around the corner. I can give you 15 minutes. The short walk was silent and tense. Inside the cafe, we found a table in the back corner, away from other customers. I deliberately chose the seat facing the door, a small but meaningful assertion of control. "You look thin," my mother started once we sat down. "Are you eating properly?" "I'm fine," I replied, not engaging with the implied criticism. "What was so urgent that you needed to come to my workplace?" They exchanged glances before my father spoke. "Your room is empty, Sue. You took almost everything. It's like you've moved out permanently." "Yes," I confirmed. "As my note explained, I've found my own place." That cryptic paragraph was hardly an explanation, my father countered. "You disappeared in the middle of the night after one disagreement." "One disagreement," I repeated incredulously. "It was the culmination of months of dismissing my career, undermining my choices, and finally calling me dead weight to my aunt." My mother at least had the grace to look ashamed. "We shouldn't have said those things. We were frustrated." "With what exactly?" I asked. "With me having a job I'm passionate about? With me working hard to advance in my chosen field? With watching you struggle in a career with limited prospects when you could do so much better?" my father interjected. "We want security and success for you." "By whose definition?" I challenged. "I am succeeding. I've been promoted. I'm leading projects. My creative director values my work enough to give me increasing responsibility. But the financial reality," my father began, "is challenging but manageable," I finished for him. "I have my own apartment. I pay my own bills. I'm building my career strategically." My mother reached across the table, though she stopped short of touching my hand when I didn't extend it. "We miss you, Sue. The house feels empty without you." "I needed space to grow without constant criticism," I explained, my voice softening slightly. "Every day in that house, I received the message that my choices weren't valid, my career wasn't respectable, and my definition of success didn't matter. My father shifted uncomfortably. We've been under stress too, you know. The economy has affected my firm. We've had to let people go. Partners are taking pay cuts. This was new information. You never mentioned financial concerns. We didn't want to burden you, my mother said. But your father's been worried about retirement. The market downturn hit our investments hard. So you're pushing me toward a more lucrative career was partially about your financial situation, I asked, pieces falling into place. My father looked away. We want you to have security because we've seen how quickly it can disappear. A moment of silence fell between us as I processed this revelation. Their behavior wasn't just about controlling my choices, it was also their fear projected onto me. There's something else you should know, my mother said hesitantly. I wanted to be an interior designer when I was young. I stared at her in shock. You what? I had a portfolio, and everything, she continued. But my parents insisted it wasn't a real career for a woman who would eventually have a family. So I became a teacher instead. You never told me this, I said, stunned by this glimpse of a mother I'd never known. I thought I'd made the right choice, the practical choice, she explained, tears forming in her eyes. But seeing your passion for design, I think I recognized something I had given up. And instead of supporting you, I tried to protect you from what I feared would be disappointment. The realization was like a physical wave washing over me. We were caught in a generational pattern, parents trying to protect children from pain by steering them toward what felt safe. Children resisting to follow their authentic paths, conflict emerging from love, expressed through control, rather than support. I understand your concerns better now, I said carefully. But you need to understand that criticizing my choices and dismissing my career wasn't helpful or motivating. It was harmful. My father nodded slowly. We handled it poorly. But disappearing wasn't the answer either, Sue. It was the only answer I could find in that moment, I replied firmly. I needed to prove to myself that I could stand on my own, that my path was valid even without your approval. Our conversation continued for nearly an hour, well beyond my original 15-minute limit. We didn't resolve everything. Deep patterns don't change in a single coffee shop encounter, but we established important truths. They acknowledged the hurtfulness of their words and actions. I explained the reality of my industry and career trajectory with more patience than I'd had before. As we prepared to leave, my mother asked tentatively, "Will you come home for Sunday dinner sometime? No pressure about moving back, just family time." I considered her offer carefully. Not yet, I decided. I need more time to establish my independence. But maybe in a few weeks we could meet at a restaurant instead. Neutral territory. They accepted this boundary with visible disappointment, but no argument, a small but significant shift from their previous expectations. One more thing, I added, as we stood to leave. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it needs to be based on respect for my choices, even when you don't understand them. I won't subject myself to more criticism of my career. My father extended his hand formally, as if we were concluding a business meeting. We'll try. That's all I can promise, that we'll try to understand. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning. As I watched them walk away toward the parking garage, I felt something unexpected. Not the anger or resentment that had fueled my departure, but a complex mixture of empathy and determination. They were flawed people, doing their best with the tools they had, just as I was. The difference was that I was now writing my own story, not following the script they had imagined for me. 3 months after leaving my parents' house, my small bedroom in the Bucktown apartment truly feels like home. I've painted the walls a soft sage green, hung string lights around the window, and found a vintage desk at a thrift store that perfectly fits the corner by the radiator. My roommates have become friends, our creative schedules aligning in unexpected ways. Jenna and I often critique each other's work over morning coffee, while Zach introduces us to new music during impromptu living room listening sessions. Financial management has become second nature. I maintain my detailed budget spreadsheet, allocate a specific amount for groceries and essentials each week, and have even started a modest emergency fund that grows by small but consistent deposits. The client project I led was completed successfully, earning me not just the temporary pay increase, but a permanent promotion to designer with a corresponding salary adjustment. Your growth this quarter has been exceptional, Mia told me during my performance review. Not just in design skills, but in client management and team leadership. Whatever personal changes you've made are clearly working for you professionally. She doesn't know how right she island, removing myself from an environment of constant criticism, has allowed my confidence to flourish. I take more creative risks, speak up more in meetings, and pursue ambitious concepts that I might have previously abandoned for fear of failure. The relationship with my parents has entered a new phase of cautious rebuilding. After our coffee shop confrontation, I maintained my boundary of no home visits for several weeks. Instead, we met at a restaurant near my office for dinner one Sunday evening. The conversation was stilted at first, focusing on safe topics like their garden and my cousin's new baby. Gradually, over subsequent monthly dinners, we established a different kind of connection. They still don't fully understand my career, but they've stopped actively criticizing it. My father even asked to see my portfolio during our last meal together, actually looking at the projects instead of immediately questioning their value. The grocery store rebrand is quite striking, he commented, studying the before and after comparisons on my tablet. I can see why the client was impressed. My mother has made even more surprising efforts. She sent me a book on the history of graphic design for my birthday and recently mentioned taking an online interior decoration course just for fun, a small step toward reclaiming her abandoned creative interest. 5 months after moving out, I invited them to see my apartment for the first time. The visit was both awkward and healing. My mother assessed my small room with a designer's eye, offering genuine compliments on how I'd maximize the limited space. My father seemed most impressed by my budgeting system, nodding with unexpected approval when I explained my financial management approach. "You've done well with what you have," he acknowledged, perhaps the most meaningful praise he could offer from his value system. The most significant breakthrough came unexpectedly. Last month, my mother suggested we try family therapy. "We've fallen into patterns that aren't serving any of us," she explained during our phone call. "Maybe a professional could help us communicate better." The first session was difficult, with old hurts resurfacing and defensive reactions threatening to derail the conversation. But our therapist, Dr. Lillian Carter, skillfully guided us toward expressing feelings without accusations. We've had 3 sessions so far, each slightly less tense than the last. During our most recent meeting, my father made a statement that stunned me. "I realize now that my definition of success is just that, mine," he said slowly, clearly struggling with the words. "It's not fair to impose it on Sue when she has her own definition that's equally valid." Coming from him, this represents enormous growth. He may never fully embrace my creative career, but his willingness to acknowledge my right to choose it matters tremendously. My own healing has happened through multiple channels. The distance from my parents gave me space to process my feelings without their immediate influence. My growing professional success provided external validation that counterbalanced years of familial doubt. And perhaps most importantly, I found community among other creatives who understand both the challenges and rewards of artistic careers. Last week, an unexpected opportunity arose. The local arts center where I take figure drawing classes is organizing a showcase of work by emerging designers and artists. When the coordinator, after seeing my sketchbook, invited me to display some of my professional and personal projects, I immediately accepted. The gallery opening is tonight. I've selected a combination of client work with permission and personal explorations that represent my journey as a designer. My roommates will be there for support, along with several colleagues from Creative Spark. After considerable thought, I also invited my parents. "It would mean a lot if you could come," I told them during our last therapy session. "But I understand if it's not your thing." To my surprise, they agreed immediately. "We want to understand your world better," my mother said. "This seems like an important step." As I put the finishing touches on my display this morning, I reflected on the past 6 months. Leaving home was the hardest decision I've ever made, but also the most necessary. In walking away from financial security and familiar surroundings, I found something far more valuable: self-trust and authentic identity. The apartment doorbell rings, interrupting my thoughts. It's Amanda arriving early to help me prepare for the evening. "Nervous about your parents coming?" she asks, as we arrange cheese and crackers on serving plates. "A little," I admit, but also hopeful. They're trying in their way. "And you're thriving," she points out. "That's the best response to their doubts." She's right. My success isn't measured by my bank account, though it's slowly growing, or my job title, though I'm proud of my promotion. It's measured by the alignment between my outer life and inner values, by the integrity of pursuing work that matters to me, regardless of others' approval. When my parents arrive at the gallery later, they seem uncomfortable at first, among the artistic crowd. But they stand proudly beside me when acquaintances approach my father, even handing out my business cards to several interested attendees. "Your work is really good, Sue," my mother whispers during a quiet moment. "I can see why you fought so hard to pursue this." The comment brings unexpected tears to my eyes, not because I needed her validation, but because it represents a bridge being rebuilt between us. One where I don't have to diminish myself to maintain connection. Sometimes the hardest boundaries to establish are with the people who love us most imperfectly. Sometimes leaving is necessary not as rejection, but as an act of self-preservation and growth. And sometimes the foundation you build for yourself becomes strong enough to create new connections on healthier terms. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents. We're still navigating new territory, still unlearning harmful patterns, still finding the balance between independence and family ties. But I know with certainty that I made the right choice that night when I packed my bags and left. True respect can't be demanded with ultimatums about rent payments. It can only be built on recognition of each other's humanity and choices. I had to leave to discover this truth, and perhaps my parents needed my absence to begin their own journey toward understanding. As I look around the gallery, at my displayed work, at my supportive friends, at my cautiously proud parents, I realize that sometimes you have to build your own foundation before you can safely build bridges to others. The most important room I've designed isn't in my apartment or in my childhood home. It's the space I've created within myself for authenticity, courage, and self-respect. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own path, or found yourself having to set boundaries with people you love? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is write your own definition of success, even when others don't understand it. Thank you for listening to my journey.